All right, and welcome everyone to the much anticipated, kind of long overdue, because we were supposed to launch this last week, but session one of a Stars Without Number actual play that we are entitling the Anima Inferni. If you want to look that up, you can. If not, I don't blame you, because, most people are lazy. But I digress. Now, here I am already, slighting our viewers, all three of them, and it's a bad start. It's a bad start. But as is tradition, all of our games, we're just going to go around the table, have everyone introduce themselves, tell us who they're going to be playing, and then we'll have a bit of an intro from myself to set the tone of, well, really this session one. So without further ado, we're going to go around the table. Let's start with Svan. I'm just going to call you Svan. We'll go to Professor Hex, Drew Baca, we'll go over to Nova, and then we'll wrap up with Charles. But Svan, take it away.
Okay, I'm Svan Svankensen or Felipe. I'm playing Molly, which is kind of a street urchin kind of person kid, but she's been treated well. It's not that kind of traumatic story, I think. I hope so at least, but I don't know where this is going. And yeah, I've been looking forward to playing Stars Without Number. Played it a whole lot this last few years, and I want to play it a lot more.
Hell
So
yeah.
thank you for having me.
My pleasure. Thank you for being here. Professor X.
Hi, I'm Professor X. You're probably sick of seeing me by now.
Never. Never.
I didn't ask you. I'm playing Narcissa Koppel, otherwise known as Sis, a child of the cloth, but for how long, who knows? The end. Thank you.
And is Drew next?
I guess we're going to me.
Hi,
I'm Drew. I'm going to be playing Aberhard Fuchs, who is a spoiled rich kid. Well, I guess not really spoiled. There's a lot of emotional trauma there. But he will eventually be the pilot of the ship when we have a ship.
Nova.
Okay, hello. I go by Neon. I will be playing Mr. Nova von Grimborn. He is also a noble. Not really the spoiled rich kid, sort of. He's more of the, I'm here. I have older siblings. They tend to be the next line of succession. So I'm just trying to figure out what I want to do in life. That's what he wants to do. And so, but he's taking a shine to someone else. His mentor that has taught him and has always hanged out with him, even though he's always been more of the type that doesn't couldn't make much friends because of his status. So
Charles.
And I'm Charles. I am playing Lucian von Ordo, another noble, except he's a fallen noble in that his noble house was they were declared heretics, and the Oracle Inquisitors came in and arrested his parents and took him and his brother away. He's been in a monastery for the last year or so. They've been re-educating him to be a loyal follower of the oracles, but it's still not sitting well with him. He's still dealing with the fall of his house and everything that he knew in his childhood.
Very good. Very, very good. And of course, I am Der Wolf, the Game Master. We open our first scene. Each of you, your heads are spinning, trying to remember precisely how you got to where you find yourselves. As your eyes adjust to these kind of cold, very just soulless, kind of almost like fluorescent lights, you start to see that you are surrounded by just metallic walls. But you're not alone. There are 1, 2, 3, 4, a dozen other children around you. You see that there are beds, cots, and there's this ever-present kind of rumbling sensation that is accompanied by this kind of humming sound. This sort of wum, 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 and every so often a kind of pulse or a pull. You can feel the floor, the room itself seems to kind of shake, vibrate. It is July 3rd, 3200. It had all happened so fast. For some, it was like being rats hoarded into cages. For others, it was more akin to leaving for their first day at boarding school. And for a select few, all they remembered was going to sleep and then waking up in a metal room surrounded by other confused children. There was a muted roaring sound. Engines, maybe? Blurry memories of masked men escorting groups of kids to large black ship with no other markings. Questions flew around the rooms. Where are they taking us? Where is my mommy? Why is it so cold? While many of the other children looked scared, some were expressions of staunch determination, focus, and what some might even call pride. One boy, he seems a little bit taller, a little bit older than the rest, sits next to one of those cold metal walls. On his face is what looks like disbelief. He rocks back and forth, almost in a kind of meditative trance. Redemption, save me. Redemption, save me. Redemption, save me. He says it over and over and over again. And we open our first scene inside of this somewhat cold metallic room. It seems that each of you has been shoved into this room. There's not quite enough space for everyone, almost as if they sort of ran out of individual. It doesn't even appear that this transport, this ship, this room is even large enough to maintain, to kind of contain all of you. But as each of your eyes again sort of adjust, as though you were coming out of this sort of deep kind of sleep, you look around and you see a number of, I should say, unfamiliar faces. The boy in question, this somewhat taller looking boy, he's rocking back and forth. He is marcated. You see that he is wearing almost just seems to be kind of like a little spacesuit that he's wearing in this moment. He rocks back and forth, and his head just almost connects with the wall. And then finally it does. Ting once, ting twice, ting a third time. A girl with sort of purplish, almost kind of like dyed hair, looks over and calls out to him. You shouldn't do that. If you do that, you're going to get in trouble. She then looks around at everyone else. She seems to want to ask. She seems to want to engage, but is a little bit nervous in this moment. Finally, she introduces herself. My name is Aoife. What are your names?
Well, my name's Nova. It's good to meet you, in this very cramped space. So, I guess we're all here for the same reason, right?
Same reason? A girl from across the way. She has kind of this like white sort of like strip in her hair. She's next to the boy, and you see that her hand has reached out and just almost instinctually has set her hand on his knee, and she's just leaning in, even though as he continues to rock back and forth, just saying this over and over, redemption save me, redemption save me, redemption save me, over and over again. You can see her just sort of very lightly tapping his knee. It's gonna be all right. It's okay. It's gonna be all right. The redemption won't abandon us. It's gonna be all right. But the boy again just doesn't seem to register it. Nova, you've introduced yourself. The girl with the sort of purplish looking hair, a little bit older than the others. You all seem to be maybe around this like somewhere between 10, 13 years old. She, similar to the boy, might be maybe 14, 15, just a little bit older, but not too much. She nods her head towards Nova. That's a interesting name. Where are you from, Nova?
I'm from, Tedis.
Oh. I've heard that Tedis, everyone there is sick, and everyone is dying. Are you sick? Are you dying?
Not at this moment, and it's not everyone that's sick. It's just the air is somewhat polluted. I sadly I wish I could tell you more, but I'm not really a scientist or anything.
I don't think any of us are scientists. She looks over then. She looks over to a little girl with kind of darker skin and black hair. She looks over towards Sis. Hi there. What's your name?
Oh, I'm Narcissa. It's a pleasure to meet you.
Where are you from?
Oh, Svala. And you?
Wow. I've never met anyone from the core planet. That's amazing. Do you know the oracles? Have you met them?
We're not permitted to meet them, as the case may be, but I've seen them before.
The boy, who is not really standing, but more sort of like crouching. So imagine that he's like on the balls of his feet, and he's sort of just like crouched down in the corner, and he's balancing very well despite the ship, despite this room sort of shaking and vibrating from time to time, and this ever-present glow. And again, there's this jostling where everyone kind of moves and has to maybe grab onto one another or one of the beds that they're sitting on. He looks over at Sis and he says, "That's bullshit. You've never seen the oracles. You're just trying to sound cool. No way. Absolutely not. You're a liar."
Why would I lie? I have no reason to. I've just met you. I don't wish to impress you.
And then he just looks down and starts to like fidget with his hands, as though he is just a little bit nervous in this moment about what's happening. The boy's been rocking back and forth. Finally stops rocking back and forth. And he looks straight across at Lucian. He looks straight across the way at Lucian. And there seems to be...
Lucian has been watching him also the whole time.
He looks straight across at you, Lucian, and his eyes are somewhat blurry. They're kind of watery, and you can see that he just seems to be in this kind of daze in this moment. But all at once, his expression, he looks over at you, Lucian, and he says, You know why we're here, don't you? It's you. This is your fault, isn't it? It's all your fault. And he starts to kind of get up as though he's going to lunge towards you, like he's going to throw himself towards you. What do you do? Does anyone else do anything? Please.
Lucian's going to stand up and move over to the boy. What do you mean it's all my fault?
It's you. I saw you. You were with them. It's you. You're the reason. You're bad. You're wrong. And he's just starting to panic. And all of the other children, some of the other children in this room, even Aoife, she's starting to get a little bit nervous. And then you hear this kind of bumping sound. And right underneath you, Sis, right underneath you, kind of feel the bed kind of pop up a little bit. And if you maybe look down over the edge, you see that there is another boy with sort of this shaggy kind of brown hair, and you realize he's been hiding under the bed this whole time. He's been like crouched, like shoved up against the wall, and as things started to get a little bit exciting, a little bit anger, and there started to be almost like this kind of fight going on, he got nervous, tried to get up, and bumped the bed. He sees you seeing him, and then scoots a little bit farther back, trying to put himself even deeper, kind of back into the corner underneath this bed.
It's not him. I mean, we're all here together. Let's all just calm down, please. Can someone maybe give him a hug or something?
Come on. A hug is not gonna help you. I know what I did. I know what I did to be here. I've done enough stuff. Must be one of those. So, what did you do to be incarcerated?
incarcerated. We're all here for an opportunity to prove ourselves and to serve the oracles. We're part of a crusade. This isn't punishment.
What? How isn't it punishment? You're never locked up unless you did something wrong.
Have we tried the door?
Huh.
All the other
Blurry.
children shake their heads as no, they have not tried the door.
Well, we don't know if we're incarcerated. If the door can't be, if we can open it, right?
Okay, Molly approaches the door with a lot of care, and she looks for a handle or a way to open it.
I don't think you should do that.
Molly, as you reach towards the handle, we're going to do our first sort of flashback scene. And what I described to our players here is that we're going to woobly, woobly, wiggly, wobbly, woobly, woobly, as it were. And we're going to cut to a scene. Now, to give a little bit of context as to what's been happening, we opened this scene during our text RP where you were crawling through the vent system of one of the stations, the large space station that exists inside of our system here. You were going towards a supply room where there was something that you were trying to get. We never really determined it, and it's not really necessarily that important. But you had run into one of your, I suppose, contacts, if we can call them as such. Do children have contacts? I don't know. One of your business associates, as it were. A sort of wiry, nervous sort of man by the name of Fish. And you shouldn't be here, Molly. You're not supposed to be here. You shouldn't be here. You've got to go. They're looking for. They're looking. You've got to go. But you had said, no worries. I'll meet you around. It's not a big deal. And your friend whom was with you, you had told him to, if I remember correctly, and please correct me if I'm wrong, Molly, to move away, to make some noise, as it were, to move away, and to then kind of spivot around and meet you by the door. Is that correct?
Yes.
Perfect.
Yes, to make it look like I had left since I was in a vent, so Fish couldn't see me.
Love that. So we're going to open this scene with you crawling out of this proverbial vent. You're crawling out of this vent. And we're going to use a little bit of theater of the mind here, okay? But you're crawling out of this vent. You now find yourself in this sort of long, think of like an alleyway. If space stations could have alleyway, a narrow passage, number of doors left and right, just one of those storage passages. Wide enough to where you could get maybe a dolly through, plus a couple of inches on either side, but not wide enough to where you could like drive a forklift or anything through it. You're making your way down. The first thing you noticed, Molly, when you got down there, is that your friend Jamie was missing. He wasn't where he was supposed to be. He was missing, and you heard some sort of like shouting, some commotion from the direction where he should be coming from. Now, Molly, what would you have done in this moment? So to set the scene again, you're at the sort of the entrance to this alleyway that leads down to the door in which you were looking down from the vents towards where Fish was. You heard some commotion, but you don't see anyone. What would Molly have done in this situation?
Well, Molly's a vent rat, so a vent mouse, really.
Mm-hmm.
So she probably would have hidden when she heard the noise.
Mm-hmm.
It was strange for Jamie not to be in the place. They usually were, I don't know what the saying is in English, but a pair, an unbreakable pair. So yeah, she will have looked around. Something was wrong, clearly. And if she heard some screams from Jamie, she will have go find him. Probably threaten, but
so
depends
we
on what
watch
she sees.
as Molly is listening. We watch as you scampered back in, a mouse, a rat, a chinchilla, a vent chinchilla, as it were. Okay, you jumped around. And as you began to climb up, you were maybe 2-3 feet off the ground. There was a couple of handholds, sort of these natural kind of handholds to allow access to these vents for maintenance. You heard his voice. Hey, let me go! Let me go! It was Jamie. He was shouting. He was screaming for help, and it sounded like he was down at the other end, all the way down at the other end of this proverbial alleyway, at least what we're calling an alleyway. And as perhaps you looked down that alleyway, Molly, you could see these kind of red lights. So it almost appeared as though someone had a flashlight, but had put red cellophane over the front, and they were shining. You could see these sort of shadowy outlines of what appeared to be a struggle happening that was being sort of shown. The shadows were being shown from these red lights on the back wall, and one of these shadows looked about Jamie's size, and the others looked to be, describe it to you what you would think as a child. They looked to be massive kind of monsters, like these massive sort of just shadowy, boxy-like monsters were grabbing onto Jamie. And you could hear these sort of boxy kind of voices that seemed like it was someone speaking, but it was coming through. They were sort of muted. And they were yelling, and he was shouting, no, let me go, no. What would Molly have done in this moment?
Well, is there another way out? Or do they need to come back the same way they came? I mean, from where Molly's standing.
So based on your knowledge of this station, you think that route is a dead end. So knowing that, what would Molly have done?
She will wait until they come back, because they're not killing Jamie. They're probably arresting him or something.
A minute goes by, 2 minutes then, and you watch as these masked individuals, and what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to drag one of those tokens onto the map for you. You guys can get a view of it. This is what these individuals look like. It was a sort of this white mask with a number above this sort of white kind of glow eye hole. And Jamie, who now appeared to be unconscious, he was handcuffed, and there was a bag over his head as well. So he had been basically like a black bag over his head, but you could tell it was him. You could see his clothing. You could see that scar on his left arm from when he was climbing through the vent, and he nailed himself on that jagged piece of metal all those months ago, but it had healed up. You see him being dragged just by his little arms. 2 of them are dragging him, and one is sort of leading the way. You hear one of these masked individuals. Take this one for processing. There was another one. Find them. What would Molly have done?
Follow them.
Excellent.
Pretty close, actually.
You watch as Molly begins to sort of just tail them, giving a little bit of distance. And these individuals are walking and moving away, and they're moving. And you see that they're heading in the direction of the docking bay. You know this because you've grown up on this station. In fact, you've gotten some good loot, as we can call it loot, some supplies, some things. You know who to steal from and who not to. But you watch as you were moving and moving. They're going closer and closer. And they slip into one of the larger of the docking bays. This docking bay is generally only used for large transports. And as you have this list of individuals that you steal from and don't, this is one of those docks that you avoid. There's always too much security. But you watch them take Jamie. And then perhaps you paused for a moment, Molly.
Oh, no, not now. No, this is not there. He's not coming back.
Starts to realize what's happening. You could feel this sort of presence behind you. And it was a moment. You looked back, saw a white glowing eye. You felt a shock, and black. Pitch black. Next thing you remember was waking up from. We go back to the present time. We see Molly reach for that door. You touch it. Feel a shock. Not as intense as the shock we just described, but enough to smart, perhaps make you recoil, maybe lick your finger because it burned a little bit. There's just a tiny little welt. but it appears the door is electrified. What do you do with this information?
Booby trapped. I told you. This is jail.
This
Well.
is not jail. We're here to serve the oracles. The oracles can see the proper paths. They have chosen each of us for a reason. We're to serve the oracles in the upcoming crusade.
Boy underneath the bed pipes up. His voice is almost a squeak. What do you mean a crusade? My dad said the oracles are liars. They're just taking children. He tried to fight them and they beat him. I don't even know if he's alive anymore. I hate the oracles. And I hate the redemption. Hate them all. And then he slinks back. You can hear this kind of faint whimpering from underneath the bed.
Narcissa would like to. She'll get off the bed, and she will like crouch down to sort of look underneath the bed, and if she can, she will reach out her arm, sort of as if to coax him out, but instead slap him smartly across the face.
So we watch as Sis leans down, reaches out. The boy is crying, not sobbing, not like uncontrollable tantrum, but just this kind of soft, like weeping as it were. Sees your hand, takes a moment, thinks it's to help, begins to reach towards it, leans forward, and then a swift slap. The boy doesn't recoil, doesn't get angry, simply just stops crying and goes wide-eyed, staring directly at Sis.
We're out here in the middle of nowhere, a total void, and you're going to forsake the only people who truly care about us in the emptiness? Are you some kind of idiot?
No.
Then I would suggest that you treat the oracles with a little bit more respect. Yeah?
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. And Harry actually begins to climb out from under the bed. Very sheepishly looks around. Very sheepishly looks around at everyone. And then moves over next to the boy who's still kind of crouching. And he takes up a similar position. But you guys would watch as his eyes continually dart over to Sis. Almost as if he is like a puppy that's just been disciplined and now wants to please its owner. Is the best way I can describe this in this moment. You've maybe slapped some sense into him, Sis. But as we watch this boy look over to Sis, we do a timey-wimey woobly-woob, as we did before, a little timey-wimey woobly-woob. And we pivot over to the streets. The streets of Savallo, the main planet, the headquarters of the Oracles of Redemption, the sort of ruling class, both spiritual, governmental, societal rulers of our entire system that we have here. You had met up with one of your friends, this Angelise that you had met up with. And she had mentioned that she had seen. So she kind of eyed the way. You had this cat that you had picked up. It was kind of squirming a little bit in your arms. And she had eyed the way the animal was squirming. And she said to you, I like it. The name fits your personality. What is the opposite of personality? She mused on that for a few moments, kind of thought about it, and shook her head. Never mind. If we need to leave now. If we don't leave now, we're gonna miss it. Mustafa saw the ships land last night, and if we leave now, we'll catch a glimpse of the oracles. You're coming, right?
Yes, of course I wouldn't miss it. What shall I... Oh, I have to do something with this.
Meow, meow. Cat's kind of like meowing. Getting to like, kind of like, not scratch, but paw at your face, like trying to push you away. It's cats
stop. Stop. Quit it. Negative. Get... Yeah, and she'll just kind of like, not chuck it, but sort of let it fall sort of onto the ground.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And as the cat fell to the ground, she sort of like fell out of your hands. Does that thing cats do where it like twists its body, landed, looked up at you, and if you've ever owned a cat or been around a cat, occasionally when cats get a little flustered but they're not angry enough to hiss, they let out this kind of this just like sharp like release of air. It's almost like a little like a scoff. Lets out a scoff. Its tail flicks left, right, then left again. Then it pranced off away from you. By the time this whole situation had transpired, your friend, Angelise, had already begun to sprint down this main street. Now, to describe the scene to you, you are in one of the larger cities, of the planet. And think of Savalu as being not dissimilar to the city planet in the Star Trek universe. It's not quite an entire planet that's a city, but there is very little nature that's left. This is one of the more advanced planets of this system, and it's been all of the resources from the other 3 of the 4 core worlds get funneled in some way or another to this planet, and thus there's a lot of opulent skyscrapers, and you'll see flying cars, and you'll see people wearing just the most ridiculous dress. But because of the time of day that it is, for whatever reason, it's actually a bit uncommon to see a street such as this almost devoid of anyone. And perhaps it occurs to you, sis, that maybe you heard the same broadcast, the broadcast where the oracles had announced that they were starting up the Crusaders of Redemption again. They had called into practice this act. And you remember this. You heard a portion of this. My precious flock, it is in these trying times. It is in our unerring strength, unfaltering, undying dedication to our faith that will keep us safe from the horrors of the void. It pains me to ask this of the faithful. It drives my very heart to the point of bursting in sorrow. However, to keep ourselves safe, we must enact the Conscription Act. Each family, regardless of status, will be required to offer one of their children to serve in the Crusaders of Redemption. And you remember hearing this broadcast, sis. You remember hearing the High Chancellor, the Supreme Chancellor of the Oracles of Redemption, make this announcement. In fact, it was about this time last month, and very little had happened. But you'd started to hear these sort of rumors, these whispers from among the adults that you interact with, from among even some of the other children, that the oracles are sending the Crusaders to start to... The word being used was cull. Now, maybe cull is the wrong word, but that is the word that was being used. They were going to be culling children for the Crusaders. But as you choose to chase after your friend, do you pause here in a moment? What would Sis have done in this moment?
I think she would have, once the cat was set free, let's say, she would have chased after Angelise, but she would have proceeded in that very sort of childlike way, which is that you're seeing but not seeing. You're noticing but not noticing. You're taking it in, but you're intentionally blocking it out because there's a shiny bauble in front of you, right? And I think that's the vibe. She's chasing after Angelise, but it is suddenly, it's slow, I should say. It's slowly dawning on her that, yeah, the streets are emptier and all of these things are sort of, starting to line up
children often become, I would say, hyper focused on something. So perhaps to just really reiterate what you just said, she's hyper focused on simply following her friend, and all of the strangeness that's happening around her is white noise. Is that a fair assessment?
For now, yeah.
Like that. You watch as you do catch up to her. You're a little bit faster, maybe a little bit better shape than her, fed a little bit better. You eventually do catch up to her, and the two of you continue to run in the direction of the space station. Well, not the space station, the docks, you could call it, the landing pads. And there's a bridge that actually rises up, goes over what is an old but now dry riverbed that has been left as a dry riverbed for whatever reason. But it goes up and over, but at the pinnacle, at the peak of this sort of arching bridge that is also devoid of any cars, traffic, and perhaps this slow realization. You're realizing that there's no flying cars in the sky. Many of the skyscrapers that would often have lights as the offices are open, or apartment buildings, they would be, all of them are dimmed. And as you get to the pinnacle, you can just be about 2 or 3 football fields away. You can see down sort of like a 45-degree angle, you can see this landing area. And you see that there are several of these pitch black, look like transport vessels. And you can see what appears to be a number of individuals, not dissimilar to the ones that we saw with Molly, that appear to be escorting groups of smaller individuals, maybe children. Angelise is standing up on the sort of railing. So there's like a little lip. She's got little feet up there. She's just barely hanging on and just kind of looking over. Looks back at Sis. Do you see it? Where are they? I only see... I don't... Where are the oracles?
I suppose they're still in the craft. I see the guardsmen, but not... And lots of kids like us.
Why are there a bunch of kids? Are they there to meet the oracles? What? Maybe we can get closer. Maybe we can hear what's going on. Come on. And she takes off, just running, without even waiting for a response. And the bridge goes over, leads down to this sort of what would have been a river walk at one point, but now is a dry riverbed walk. She gets to that, which gets close to, not right up to, but gets close to where these craft are currently stationed. And she just starts to take off at a full sprint.
What's the opposite of patience? Huh? Is that what you have? Fine. And she'll sprint off after.
Love it.
Angelis, taking just a moment to sort of in the back of her head, almost subconsciously, to associate the picture of those jet black ships, those craft, on the sort of like white light expanse of the landing pad with the fur patterns on the cat. Mr.
Very similar.
Mr. Negative.
Very, very similar. Yes. I'm glad you drew that. Yeah, it's perfect. Well done. I can never pull anything over you. I love that, Professor X. You're the man. But we watch as you then take off after her. And then we sort of like pan out from that. We see those jet, just like pure black crafts, no markings. We see these children being escorted into them by these masked individuals with the white kind of like glowing dot on them. And then we pan, we timey-wimey, not pan, but we kind of timey-wimey, the wiggly-wobbly, back to our current scene where we're at. The boy that's been rocking has now been calmed down. He's now been calmed down. He is just kind of mumbling to himself, but he's no longer, he wasn't shouting, but he was kind of this chanting, sort of almost like ritualistic sort of like just repetition of this redemption, save me, and he's now just, I don't know, I was just kind of mumbling to himself. The little girl that was just kind of trying to comfort him, this girl with this sort of white streak in her hair, a little pin. It's got this little like hair clip It's got a little what looks to be like a little white dove on it. Like it's just a little like it was like maybe like made of yarn. This looks like maybe her parents or something gave it to her. It's right there. She looks over at the young Ebhard, Mr. Fuchs, as it were, leans down at him. Hi, my name's Anna. What's your name? She looks to be not a dissimilar age. And correct me if I'm wrong, Drew, but your character's a little bit younger than everyone else here.
Yeah, Eb is actually 7. Like, he is
Wow.
tiny compared to these people.
Mm-hmm.
And he's just sitting there. He's very, very, very well dressed, kind of militaristic style clothing. Very blonde hair, blue eyes. But he's kind of rumpled. Obviously, everybody here is rumpled,
Mm-hmm.
and he just has this kind of like 1,000-yard stare. Like, he hasn't said anything yet, and he just looks up at the girl and he says, "My name is Eb."
Eb. That's cool. What does Eb mean?
It's short for Aberhart.
Aberhart.
It's my middle name.
I'm gonna call you Ebby.
Okay.
You've got something. You've got something on your face.
He wipes it off.
As you
It's
wipe
blood.
it off, there is a little bit of dried blood on your hand. Just a little, ever so little bit of dried blood that kind of flakes. And if you've ever had like a cut that's gotten old and you didn't really have like a bandage and you kind of wipe it, there's like this like dry kind of flakiness. You look down, and as you look down, Eb, at that dried blood, once again, a little bit of wibbly wobbly, and we cut to a scene. I want to set the tone of this scene. And we began this scene with you in the study. Your father, as he often had, was drinking.
With a candlestick.
With the candlestick, absolutely. In the study. Your father, as he often had, was very drunk. He'd come in, began to berate you. Your mother had shown up and effectively scurried him away, as it were. She told him to go get sober, that some men were here to speak with him, and had come and spent a good 30 or so minutes helping you study, talk to you, and encourage you. Very much this sort of juxtaposition between your father's stern anger, just never proud of you, and your mother's very doting, loving. But there had been this commotion from outside of your study. There had been these concussive pops that, even at the tender age of 7, you recognized as gunfire. You were even just 3 years old, you had held a firearm in your hands. Your father wanted you to be a man as soon and as quickly as possible, and he had pushed you every day until you cried, bled, or both. But in this moment, you heard this pop, pop, pop. Your mother left, went out to the hallway, quickly returned moments later, slamming the door behind her, locking it. She rushed to you, Eb. She knelt down in front of you, placing both of her hands firmly on your shoulders, shouting, and the pops got closer and closer. Pop, pop, pop. Just mumbling. You can't understand what these voices are screaming, but these concussives, pop, 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 pop. Mother looked down, her hands firmly and tightly on your shoulder. I love you, my little soldier. No matter what happens, I will always love you. It's a loud banging on that door. All you could see, Eb, all you could focus on, not dissimilar to Sis and kind of letting everything around you become this kind of white noise, was your mother. Her firm, unblinking, this sort of just unblinking stare at you. And this sort of calmness that she seemed to have despite the chaos around you. The door burst open and there was this blinding flash. Your mother all at once became less of this human in front of you and more of just this outline, this dark sort of outline in front of you. You saw her stand up, and that is when you realized that in her hand she held a gun. She turned it on these masked individuals behind her. There was shouting. You don't even remember what was said. Something about, "You can't have my..." And then you heard one of those pops. And you felt just a little bit of this sort of, just this warm moisture on your face. And that shadowy outline that had become your mother, you watched as it fell down and slumped forward. There was nothing but bright, blinding light in front of you. What would you have done in this moment? What would have been Eb's reaction?
I think it would be a few seconds of just like, oh my god, what has my life become? Like, what everything I've ever known has just changed. And then I feel like almost his training would kick in and he would dive for his mother's gun.
And as Eb dove for his mother's gun, you saw your little 7-year-old hands reach out, ever so slightly, touch the handle of the gun. These masked individuals, these bright lights swarmed around you. And as you went to grab it, you looked to the left, and that same intense stare on your mother's face was looking back at you. But it was devoid of any of the light that had been there just moments before. Last thing you remembered, shouting as you went to pick the gun up. You remember a very, very, very quick, very painful blow to the back of the head. Everything went black. We cut back to this scene with this little girl. She said, "I'm gonna call you Ebby. Maybe we can be friends. Do you want me to wipe that off?" And you see her take her sort of little a little dress. She's gonna try to reach out and try to wipe it off your face.
As she goes, he snaps up and his face kind of changes and he grabs her hand.
"I'm sorry."
It's okay. It's the last thing I have of my mother.
"What do you mean? What do you..."
And he just looks up at her.
It's very quiet.
"This is the last thing I have of my mother."
It's very quiet, and again, it's that slow realization that children would have, not having all those life experiences, not being able to jump to those conclusions so quickly. And she just doesn't know what to say. She just sort of slides back and doesn't look away from you, Eb, but is just speechless, sort of looking at you like she wants to help. It's no idea. Not a bloody idea. Ew. There's some sounds from outside of the door. Very similar to these sort of boxy, masked voices I've described in some of our other flashbacks. You hear a couple of numbers. You hear the numbers 552. You hear this number. "This group is 552. They're being processed for..." And that's all you hear. Group 552, they're being processed for. And it kind of sounds like whoever was saying this was walking past the door. And as they walked past the door, you heard this kind of a banging sound, as though maybe something was pinned to the wall or placed on the door outside, and they continued walking. The young girl, Aoife, looks back, sort of scampers away from the door, and actually bumps in to Molly, who has still, perhaps you're maybe licking your finger, the shock. But she goes, oh, I'm sorry. What do you all think we should do? Do we just wait? Should we try to get out of here? Maybe there's another way. I don't know what to do.
Molly starts looking around a little bit like a cornered rat once she saw the noises. And she looks if there's some kind of vent or panel, something inside this room.
We should wait. We've been placed here for a purpose. He looks at the girl. He says, you remember the chant of devotion?
You're talking to Aoife?
Yes.
the kind of purple-haired girl. He thinks for a moment. I think I do. Would you say it with me? And
Of course.
as you begin to do the chant of devotion, this is tradition now in our session 1, a little bit of timey-wimey woobly whoop, we cut back to a scene. Lucian, where you are in this, let's call it a monastery for all intents and purposes. You have been sent here to learn the ways of the Oracle, and eventually, hopefully, if your devotion is strong enough, maybe even be granted the honor, the glory, becoming a priest of the Oracles. And if the redemption should deem you worthy enough, perhaps even you too could rise to the levels of deacon. Perhaps, if the redemption deems it so. But you've been having a conversation. There's this intense smell of incense, actively burning incense that fills this chamber. You can see all of these stained glass windows, and imagine, if you will, that many of the churches or temples of the Oracles of Redemption, they are these circular structures, domed, and the domes have these sort of high, kind of like tip comes down, gets a little wider at the bottom, sort of stained glass representations. Think of it like the different stations of the cross, but instead in this situation, it's the different stations of the oracles meeting the redemption, and the redemption bringing the system out of the darkness, out of the chaos that was consuming it, and into the enlightened age that they now claim that you are in. But you've been having a conversation. You've been having a conversation with Brother Sarius. Now, Brother Sarius has been this sort of mentor for you. While he is not necessarily your direct teacher at all times to all things Oracle of Redemption, he has become someone that perhaps you feel you can confide in, come to with questions, challenges you in ways that your other teachers, the other priests, do not. They simply ask you to learn what is written, learn what is said, and repeat it. They're turning you into a walking regurgitation machine. But Brother Sarius is different. He asks you questions that at times, perhaps, Lucian, you think they might even be borderline heretical. But, of course, he's a brother of redemption. He himself could not be. Who knows? Perhaps I'll let you discern. Let's let you determine what it is. But he had asked you a question. It asked you a question about what you believe. He had nodded as you had said, all I can be certain of is the life I have now. What I desire is to serve. That response to his question about what if the redemption wasn't real, what if the redemption wasn't actually something that was true to be followed, he had nodded, but there was this dismissive quality to it. He seemed a little bit out of character, even for him and his ways of questioning things and challenging you. Yes, of course, child. We all aim to serve. And this is, of course, our life's work. Yes, yes, of course, of course. And then he had sort of trailed off, and as he did so, he had walked towards this circular sort of platform in the center that kind of rises up. It's where a priest or a pastor or a member of the clergy could give their sermon, and those could gather around and listen to the redemption stories and whatnot. And they were kind of central, much like the redemption is supposed to be the center of your life. When they're proselytizing, they do so from the center of the building. But he had trailed off and waved his hands. But I want you to use your mind, child. Think in this moment for yourself. If the redemption, if the oracles themselves, if they were all a bloody lie, what then? If you did not have strength, if you did not have the foundation of this faith, what would you choose to do?
Reverend brother, may I speak freely?
I ask only this of you, little Lucian. Speak your mind.
The question itself borders on heresy. I'm not a heretic, not like my father. I wish to serve the oracles. Before all of this happened, I served my family. Now, I serve the oracles. I am thinking for myself. I want to make something of myself.
See, he looked back at you as he finished his sentence. He nods. It seems in this moment, Lucian, your young, naive eyes, that this nod is one of approval, of acceptance. Maybe he's even proud of you. But as you look into his eyes, there is a quality, Lucian, a quality of disappointment that for a moment reminds you of your father. Not in a bad way. Perhaps you had done something wrong and he had scolded you. He was not a mean man. There is an element of disappointment. Very well. It is good to know that you are not like your father. I will tell you
With
this, Lucian.
When he says that, there's kind of a look of pain in Lucian's eyes. He tries to cover it up because
Yes.
he wants to be like his father,
Yeah.
but in most ways, but not the heresy.
As you have that look of pain, the brother takes a few steps forward. He grabs your chin. That, right there, Lucian. That look. Remember, it is your humanity that the redemption is supposed to save. Would you lose your humanity if you felt nothing for your father? You could never truly serve the redemption. You remember nothing else from our time together. Remember that, Lucian. Remember your humanity. You understand? He has not let go of your chin this whole time.
Yes, Reverend Brother. I think I do.
Very good. You are to pack your things. You leave in the morning for the Crusaders.
He would bow. And if you want to switch back to the other to the previous scene,
Just
I
about
can
to do so.
see Lucian still hearing those words, it's your humanity, it's your humanity.
Mhm.
And with that he would look back at the boy who's rocking back and forth, and he would consider something, and then he would get up, walk over, and sit by the boy,
Mhm.
and put his hand on the boy's shoulder and say, "My name is Lucian.
Mhm.
It's going to be all right."
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I love that. I love that. And perhaps you, the girl with the purple hair, Aoife, the boy whom finally introduces himself as Jesse, all of you are kind of saying these little silent I would almost say little children's prayers. You know what I mean? Little
Mhm.
prayers to the oracle to, put the evil spirits away, the monsters under your bed, whatever it is, to sort of shoo those things away into the darkness. And you are having this moment. And even the little girl, this little girl, Anna, and she is not repeating it, but she's leaning in, she's listening. And then the two boys on the other side start to move over, and they're kind of listening in. And the boy who was a little bit older, this Freddy, not a little bit older, but he was in the corner by himself, little Freddy, he starts to kind of mouth the words together. And I'm curious. I'm curious about. I see Nova has moved over into the corner, which makes sense. I like that. But I'm curious. Sis, Molly, Eb, what would you guys be doing in this moment as they all start to congregate and sort of take this kind of solace together?
Okay, Molly's probably missing her friend and group sorely,
Mm-hmm.
but I think she will be just getting closer, not saying anything, but she would be looking for exits, panels, vents. She's a vent mice, so she
Molly
feels
would
safer there.
notice that there are two little like vents about the size of maybe an apple. That's where the airflow is coming from, but not big enough to crawl through, unfortunately. Unless you were that chinchilla we talked about earlier. So not big enough for you, unfortunately. But I would say that there is a feeling of, like you had described yourself, Ollie, trapped. You are trapped. There is no window. There is no exit. There's a door that is electrified. You are, I believe you had said, in prison. Arrested. What about Eb? What would Eb do in this moment?
Other than his brothers, this is the most time he's spent with other children in his entire life. So he doesn't really know what to do. He's just gonna kind of sit in the corner. He doesn't look as shell-shocked. He's kind of come out of it a little bit, but he just does not. No part of his 7 years has prepared him to be in a room full of other children. So he's just going to kind of sit and study how they interact with each other, and maybe after a while he'll try and talk to somebody, but now is not the time. He's gathering data.
What's interesting, and I'd like to kind of just follow with you for a moment, what you notice is that these children seem to sort of flock, I would describe it as. They seem to flock to whomever seems the strongest. And when I say whoever seems the strongest, whomever takes initiative. And you've kind of watched it for a moment. It was Molly when she went for the door, and the kids were like, yeah, let's go to the door maybe. And then there was a moment where it was pivoted over as Sis sort of took charge. And they're like, yeah, we all need to calm down and understand. And now it's over to Lucian, who's kind of leading this little prayer circle, literally like a little prayer circle. But it's been this sort of like this flow of all of these other children sort of following whomever is, like, no one's really in charge, and they seem to kind of flow like the wind, as it were. And it perhaps reminds you, Eb, of your father at one point, one of the few moments that he wasn't berating you, explaining to you how troops, the laymen, as he called it, are like fucking dogs. Little dogs. They can be trained, herded. Those dogs can herd sheep. So he's talking about like the officers, anyone under his role who was like close to being a general, right? Like he was like really.
He was an
high
admiral.
Up. An admiral. He was an admiral. Fuck
yeah, he was an admiral.
Right?
Yeah.
He's talking about like all the men under him are like dogs that we trained, and those trained dogs go out and herd the sheep. And it's like you're kind of seeing this in practice. Like there is no admiral. That's what's missing. There's no admiral to tell the dogs. You're seeing who are the dogs in this group. At least that's how your mind's interpreting it. And you're also seeing who among these folks are the sheep. To kind of describe that. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Like that.
Go
ahead.
He can see, seeing that, he also sees that he is by far the smallest person in this room.
Super small.
And knowing what he knows will not affect his standing in this group, because he will not be the strongest. No matter what kind of training or forethought or knowledge he has about this, he is not in a position to take any advantage of it. And that makes him kind of sad also.
Yeah, which makes sense. What about Sis? Sis, what are you doing?
Well, that would depend on whether or not the sort of guardsmen had confiscated everything that we had on us prior to processing.
Tell me what you're trying to get, and then as the game master, I'll determine whether or not I'm going to screw everything up. Tell me what you want to have.
It just would have been, Sis has a habit of carrying around like a kind of a moleskin-sized notebook, right? Just
tactical
jotting
nuke,
down.
Little tactical nuke.
Yeah.
Okay, good.
Yeah. It's a kill streak. She
You
would
have
have carried around this little journal for notes and sketches and things like that. So if she still has that on her, she would have sort of gotten back up in the bed, crossed her legs, and just sort of made some observations about not only the situation that they're in, but also the other kids, right?
Very good. As you are making those little notes and observations, we're going to pivot over to the corner where Nova, you have sort of sequestered yourself in the corner away from everyone else. A couple things might occur to you. Just like Ebb has realized to himself that he's the smallest, you perhaps overheard him say, "This is all I have left of my mother." We start to watch as you would begin to remember this conversation you had with the mentor you had mentioned earlier. Over this mentor you had mentioned. So we're going to once again fade back this memory of this conversation where you had been talking with Cass, and Cass had taught you about less so of like tactical warfare, like Ebb would have learned. Ebb learned about big battles and armies. You learned more of this practical sort of street kind of combat. Correct me if I'm wrong, Nova. If I'm speaking out of my patootie, you got to tell me. But if I'm not, I'm going to keep going. I'm seeing head bobs. Perfect. I'll take head bobs. Thumbs up in the chat. No worries. But we watch as you are walking around, and to describe this planet, you grew up on Teus. And it is this sort of red, not dissimilar to how we might imagine the surface of Mars, but even darker red. And there is a sort of rich mineral, this material that is being mined from the planet. And the mining, imagine just kind of similar to the way that the core world of Savalu is just this massive sort of city planet. Imagine Teus as being this sort of massive mine planet. The air is constantly full of this kind of thick red dust from the constant mining. There's this ever-present sort of rumbling wherever you walk, and maybe you, since you've lived on this planet for so long, you don't even really notice it anymore. It's like if you live near a freeway and that sound, that drone of the freeway just becomes a white noise. You don't even actually hear it anymore, but you don't even really feel it anymore. You've begun to walk, and you would notice that as you're on this ship, Nova, your balance is a little off because you're used to having to like constantly compensate for the rumbling of all these large mining machines. But you are standing in, I want you to imagine like a strip mine. You see that like large, deep kind of circle as it goes down into the earth, right? You are near the base, so you can see these walls of red stone and earth rising up around you. And you are standing next to your, well, she's kind of like the guard, the sort of like, she like runs this particular mine for your family, if I remember correctly. And you've been having this sort of practical lesson with you. And she had pointed out these two individuals pushing this cart. One of them, a strong, powerful, tattooed man, not wearing a respirator, whereas many people on the planet wear a respirator if they can afford it. He was wearing a respirator, wearing one. So he's walking, he looks proud, strong, full of himself. And then there was a smaller man, shriveled, kind of coughing, leaning over, but he was helping push this cart. And she had asked you the question, of these two men, which is the most dangerous? You had responded with being the smaller one. She had then asked you, very well, let us try something a bit more advanced. How do you fight someone that has nothing to lose? You had mentioned that it was desperate, does not always mean stronger. You would maintain composure and look for the right moment to deliver a fatal blow. He nodded, watching as the two men began to continue to push the cart off down this sort of track near one of the openings of the mines that lead deep into the planet. And I ask you now, Nova, what do you look for? How do you know it is the right time to strike?
Well, from all of our lessons, every one of us has a different tell. We breathe differently. We move differently. No one is the exact same. So I would try to find out what makes them, what this person does, and then find the right moment to strike based on if they're swinging too far or if they're breathing too hard. It's just perception, I think, right?
Nods. Perception. Indeed. That does presume, though, Nova, that you have enough time to study your target. In the heat of the moment, when it is kill or be killed, what then, Nova? What then?
Well, I wouldn't know. Maybe sometimes the best answer is to strike first before they can do anything.
There was a laugh. And again, both of you were wearing these respirators. So imagine, if you will, there's this kind of cone kind of sound. Precisely, Nova. Precisely. Sometimes, when it is kill or be killed, you must simply kill. I've heard rumors. That is to say, I've heard... I don't think we're going to be able to take our little walks very much longer, Nova.
Oh. Are you leaving the service of my parents?
She shakes her head left and right. No, little Nova. I'm not supposed to tell you this, but I overheard a conversation between your parents. It appears that, of the children, you are the one they are going to be giving to the Oracle. You'll be leaving very soon.
The oracles? What should I do?
There was this there was a loud kind of rumbling, and then the grinding of metal on metal, and then a bunch of shouting that happened. She looked up in the direction. You saw one of these massive... You ever seen those massive earth movers? Giant clawed machines, and they're just enormous. They can just literally terraform the planet kind of thing. One of those is breaking down. It's kind of busting. There's a bunch of screaming. You see sparks starting to fly, and people are starting to panic. But she doesn't seem to panic. She just looks over at it, looks around, sees the right people going towards it. She looked back down at you, Nova. What can you do, Nova? Survive. Survive. That's all any of us can do. You can look at this as a bad thing. Or you can look at this as an opportunity. Less likely that you'll get the red lung if you're off planet. Positive. You won't be able to walk with me, but oracles. You'll find someone else to walk with. Just do me a favor, Nova. Try to make more than one friend. You felt her reach out, place like a kind of like comforting hand on your shoulder. Would you have said anything or simply let that moment lie?
Thank you for everything you've done for me. And you're right. I have to learn to survive, like you've taught me. No matter the situation, always laugh.
They'll never expect you to strike if you're laughing. Nodded. You heard more grinding, more shouting. You heard someone call her name. Then she took off, and we wiggity 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 woo back to the present. See you standing there. I'd like to kind of open this moment, everyone. We've had a moment to sort of get a glimpse into the kind of days, the moments, even maybe the hours, the seconds, some people's situations that led you being on this ship, traveling to some unknown location. Anybody have any moments, conversations, questions for themselves, the other players? I want to just kind of open it up to you guys, like sort of take the reins. Okay, if you don't, take a moment to think. Go from there.
I'd like to ask, what do you mean? Like, is this out of character, or what do you?
In game, in character. Okay. If you have something out of character too, that's totally fine. Ask away. I'm here for you.
Well, Nova would finally speak from his corner. He would look towards the group and say, oracles or no oracles, redemption or no redemption. What matters is there's 10 of us in here. If we all work together, we can survive. It's very important to know that we have numbers, and if anything were to happen, protecting each other is most important. As we wait for whoever comes to the door, and for whatever fate awaits us.
This sounds familiar to Molly. The mice work like that, she says. Yes, I guess we could be mice. But mice don't strike each other for no good reason. And she stares at what is it? Was it sis? I think. So, yeah, be careful.
Well, I think we still have to talk about our names, right? I mean, I know Aoife, and I'm Nova. What about, I mean, I heard Eb. And was it Anna?
Anna, the girl with the white in her hair, nods.
Yes. And what about everyone else? I might have been a little preoccupied thinking about other things.
The boy with the blue sleeves and the white shirt with the gray kind of background, he looks over at Nova. My name's Freddy. Everyone just calls me Fred. Or Eddie. Might be confusing though because there's Eb over there. Eb, and Eddie? Huh, that's funny.
Huh. That is kind of funny.
My
What
name
about
is
Flo?
Lucian. Oh, yeah.
God.
Oh yeah. Lucian says, "My name is Lucian," and for a moment, his eyes kind of go down to the floor, and then flick back up at everyone else. He's afraid that the odds are against it of anybody recognizing that he's from a family that's been cast down, but he's still afraid, that's gonna. So there's kind of a tentative look to him as he looks around and then back to the floor again. especially if he could tell they're other children of nobles. He's afraid that what they will think of him, being cast out of the nobility.
Oh, maybe you could make up a name then.
Oh, well, he's not that going to go that far because he's still proud of that name, even though.
Dishonesty is not very redemption. Honesty is key. Come now. Come now. We see that this cis girl, Tax had to step away for a moment. We see Cis, she is just kind of doing sketching everyone around and taking little notes. Very quiet and to herself. The boy with the shaggy hair that Cis had slapped introduces himself as Harry. And you're all just taking a moment to kind of introduce, and I would describe it as this sort of tenseness that had been there just 10, 15 minutes ago at this point. Kind of tenseness in the air, starting to kind of fade away. Children are starting to ask each other questions. Where are you from? Done? Like, how did you get here? What do you remember? Have siblings? Like, they're asking the things kids do. What are your favorite colors? Like, they're just, it's starting to become a little less scary, at least for some of the group. For yourselves, you make your own choice. But for the other children here that are not you, they're starting to just kind of talk to each other. Giggle and laugh, like talk about things. Just seem almost like they're forgetting the situation that they're in. Ebb, over there, all serious as he does, the boy Harry leans down, kind of looks at him. Harry is a little bit bigger than you, Ebb, not too much bigger. Kind of looks at your clothing, says, are you one of those nobles?
No. My father was an admiral and a merchant. I come from a merchant family.
Oh, thanks for a moment. And why are you here?
I don't know.
I thought my dad said merchants didn't have to do. Are you sure your dad was an admiral?
Very sure.
I don't know.
He was in charge of procurement for the entire military, the entire navy.
What's that?
He was the one that told them what to buy and where for any equipment that the navy needed.
Well, then why didn't he why didn't he tell them to not procure you?
He did.
Well, if he was an admiral, why didn't they listen?
I don't know. They killed him and my mother.
Mention of they killed him. Mother. His eyes once again go wide. Takes a step back. Again, doesn't really seem to know what to say. They killed him? Who killed them? Is it
The men in the masks.
and at the mention men in the mask, there's this sort of electrical sparking sound that happens. We watch as this sort of like it's like outline. You can see electricity kind of run down the edge of the door, up and around. And you hear this kind of sort of noise. And I actually have. Did I? I did. You hear this kind of beeping noise. It goes over and over again. And the door slides open. Door slides open. Standing in the doorway, flanked by two of those masked individuals The very same ones that you recall having killed your parents. But you see this looks to be a woman, like some sort of woman. She has very pale skin, sort of just a little bit kind of reddish kind of lips, but not too pronounced. Her hair is this sort of mixture of this kind of blue but white. And what you notice about her, and none of you would have ever seen anything quite like this, her head seems to be human. We get down to her neck, human. And then there appears to be metal right below her neck. You can just barely see what appears to be this sort of glowing kind of metal. And as it comes down, you can see that one of her hands is completely, her right hand appears to be made of this kind of black material. And there's a kind of this like robotic sort of quality to it. You see her kind of flex it. Her left hand appears to be made of flesh and bone. She looks into the room, and sort of very quickly you see her eyes, and it's strange. Her eyes seem to, like, you know how the pupil can get wider, smaller? They're like unnaturally getting bigger and smaller. And you see her eyes darting from each of you, like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, darting from person to person to person. And she looks back over the other two. That one, there, in the center. He's positive. Guards, forward, have no guns, but have these like batons, and they start to move forward. And as they move forward, I want to give each of you a moment to respond. Again, this sort of half mechanical woman looked around, locked eyes on, and said the one in the center. And you guys would recognize that she was locking eyes on Harry, the boy with the shaggy hair, was hiding under the bed. Sis had slapped. The boy in front of him, Freddy, is like, I didn't do anything. And he starts to kind of step back. The guards pay no attention. Jesse, who's been relatively quiet, starts to shake back and forth again, starting to call for the redemption, leaning his head against the wall. The girl Anna starts to try to reach over and calm him. Aoife steps back. What are the rest of you doing? Let's start with Sis. What are you doing? You've been doodling. You doing, Sis, as these armed men start to move in?
Absolutely nothing, because I think this is Oracle branded karma happening to young Harry here.
It's fair. What about Molly?
Oh, Molly wants kind to hide the kid, but it's kind of too late.
Correct.
So she yells at the woman, "Hey, cyborg! What did he do? What are we in for?"
Completely ignores you. We're gonna pivot over. Eb, what do you do?
Eb is going to wait until the men in the masks get right up next to Harry, and then he is going to leap at one of them and try and take his stun baton.
Ooh, I love it. This little 7-year-old kid going after an adult in power armor. Glorious. You love to see it. You love to see it.
Wait, they have power armor?
Take it up. Well, they're in like those exoskeletons kind of things. Like, yeah, you'll find.
And he's not like leaping. He's like kind of diving behind him, shoulder tackling like behind the knee to try and get leverage. He's putting all of his weight down like right on the knee as it's like kind of extended forward. Like he's been trained in this shit from like
I like
birth.
it. I like it. I like it. I want to give the other two just a moment. Lucian, what do you do?
So when the door opened and they came in, Lucian stood up, not like at attention, but as if like a high priest or something came in. He stood up as if ready to serve or whatever.
Very good.
Like that.
Very good.
And I'll do his reaction to Ebbs.
I love that. So we'll get there. And then what about Neon? Nova, excuse me.
Nova would be actually he would actually look over the people that just came in, seeing what they might have on them, the numbers, and then he would
Two masked men. To describe a little more, they wear these masks, like it's like a black sort of like tight kind of cowl over the back of their head, right? And they have this armor on that seems to be like an exoskeleton. So have you ever seen those modern day exoskeletons that like help you maybe lift stuff? You ever saw Elysium? He's got that exosuit that he wears that gets like drilled into him. It kind of looks similar to that. And they're fully, completely covered. You can see no flesh. You can see no skin, nothing. They appear to be just these like walking almost like robots. But you can like tell just by the way they walk that there's a humanoid element, right? The woman herself, this sort of cyborg, as Molly had shouted out, is just standing, not necessarily at attention, but she's standing in the doorway. Her one hand still just kind of flexing a little bit, like doing this, like stretching her fingers one after another, very methodically, like this. And then the other hand, you can see this ever so slight tremor in her left, in her human hand, just ever so slight tremor. She's just watching the two men move forward. But as you watch them, what you would pick up, Nova, is that thing about the woman. Slight twitch in the left hand, sort of nervous, almost not a nervous, but this kind of methodical kind of tick that she has. She just kind of does this. Just ever so slightly in front of her. Like she's almost like she's counting. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4 kind of thing. The two men, though, they have a baton, armor, and pretty much nothing else. Just armor and the baton. The batons are out. You can see they're like stun batons. As Ebb rushes forward, you were going to say something, Nova. I'm sorry. What were you going to say?
Since he notices all this and everything, he's going to be trying to do like this signal because he's in the corner, right? And
yeah.
You can see everything.
Like don't do it, Ebb.
Yeah, no. Well, just anyone, just calm down. Like he's trying to tell him to just calm down.
Now is not the time to strike. Now is not the time to strike.
Right. Yeah, then Ebb, does his thing.
And then Ebb lunges forward, gets around. You maybe push, kind of barely because he doesn't expect it. You push Harry to the side. Harry kind of falls into Lucian. You rush forward, try to get around. And as you get around and you go to throw yourself into the knee, you realize that you're being lifted up off the ground by one of these guys by the neck. Like he's lifting you up. And he looks over at you, kind of tilts the head back and forth, and it's strange because there's this single white kind of dot in the center, and you remember it. You can just see that dot. Maybe it's the same guy. You don't know. Maybe this is the one that pulled the trigger on your mom. You're not even sure, but you're angry. We watch as Ebb is flailing, looks back over his shoulder, and he says, Priestess Vosto, this one has fight. Perhaps he too should be chosen for the program. She shakes her head. Negative. He has none of the identifying markers. Not very well. Picks him up. Another time, little one. Kind of chucks you into the corner. You go flying, like goes right past Molly and just kind of oofs into the corner. The wind is instantaneously knocked out of you as you slump down onto the bed, and thankfully it was there. It kind of softens the landing. But Harry, who is fallen over into Lucian, is trying to struggle. The two men grab him. He starts to struggle. You see one of them bring up this baton. There's this kind of noise. Harry stops struggling. Watch as he is escorted out of the room. And as he is escorted out of the room, this cyborg woman waits for a moment and looks inside the room, and sort of once again the eyes from person to person to person. None of this will make sense to you, but in time all will be clear to you. Get your rest. We'll need it for what is. Doors then whoosh, electrical kind of ring goes up and around, leaving you all in this moment. Aoife is the first to speak. Oh, by the oracles, they're taking us one by one. What are they doing with us? What did she mean he had the markers? I hope I don't have the markers. I don't want to be taken. And she starts to kind of panic in this moment.
Lucian turns to Ebb. Why did you do that?
Those are the fuckers that killed my parents.
Confused murmurs from some of the other children.
Yeah, Lucian is that can't be.
Can't be, but is.
Boy, Freddy from across the room. It doesn't make any sense. Those are the Oracle's. Wait, those are the Crusaders? I think. No, those are the good guys. They don't kill. They kill the bad guys. They kill heretics. The only reason they would have killed your parents is if they were heretics. That would make you a heretic. Looks over at Lucian. I think that one's a heretic. Looks over at Sis. I think that one's a heretic. We should do something. What if his heresy rubs off on us? Then they'll take us away, like they did the other heretic.
Ebb, the last time he says heretic, Ebb just like screams and launches himself at him.
So he watches, Ebb screams, leaps over Molly, runs across Sis, drawing. Your notebook is knocked out of your hand onto the floor, and he tackles this kid onto the ground. And the kid is just so shocked by this aggression that he's on the ground. And I imagine, Ebb, even though you've been trained by your father, even though you have undergone some military training, at this point, it's just a child's like tantrum, and you're just
He's a 7-year-old attacking what, like a 12-year-old?
Yeah.
Like, he has just enough training to have gotten to the kid and knocked him over, and now he's just flailing.
Full flail.
Yeah, there's no more thought.
All of the other children other than your characters are in complete disbelief as to what is transpiring. I'll offer the scene to the rest of you at this moment.
Well, if that's what heretics are like, I think I want to stand on the side of heretics.
Ooh.
I'm gonna. Go ahead.
Ebb is just take it back. My father was a great man. You know, just all of that. We're not heretics. Take it back. You're the heretic. Your face is a heretic. Those guys are heretic. Like,
while this is going on,
just nonsense.
Go ahead.
While this is going on, Sis just casually walks over to where the notebook had been knocked over, and just picks it up and, goes back to sit down. She mutters under her breath, "It's not like cooties. It doesn't rub off. You make a choice and whatever."
I love it. Still,
and were you gonna do something, Nova?
Go ahead, Nova.
Nova decides to finally take some action, so he's gonna come over and then grab at Ebb around like the neck and put his arm around him. Like in a little mini chokehold.
Yeah. You are large enough to where he can do very little to resist you, unfortunately. I'm sorry, man.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm just gonna, I'm just whispering, you're not a heretic. You're nothing. Just calm down. If you fight, they might take you as well.
Fine, they can have me. I don't care. Just swinging wild, like flailing wildly.
Still trying to kick. The boy, Freddy, has backed away. Is kind of backed away up against, almost hits the door, but then Aoife grabs him and is like, "Not the door," and pulls him over into the corner next to her, and he's bleeding. He's got a little cut on his face from where you scratched him. His lips a little swollen, and she's doing her best to try and stop the bleeding. She takes the sleeve of her shirt, is dabbing it, trying her best in this moment, as you are still being held by Nova and flailing.
Keep flailing. Let it all out. Just calm down. We need everyone here.
He fairly quickly tires himself out and just starts crying. Just sobbing.
All right. Go pick a bed, get some rest. Everything will be fine.
As soon as you let him go, he just collapses on the ground. goes fetal and cries.
Lucian would step forward and help Ebb up unless he fights him, and would move him over to a bench and would sit by him.
Brilliant.
Because Lucian is seeing what happened to his parents through Ebb's eyes,
Yes.
and he can't reconcile why would they do this. Well,
Mm-hmm. The boy in the corner, Freddy, is very quiet. Him and Aoife are talking. Boy Jesse has stopped shaking and is now seems to have also tired himself out. Even Anna begins to yawn, and Molly, being the Jeffries 2 brat, Profess Hacks in our Discord, Jeffries 2 brat, you're the one that actually notices a change in the sound that the vents are making. And you're always listening if there was an air leak. You live on a space station, if there was a change in pressure, and you can hear this sort of hissing sound, and you start to feel a little sleepy. You start to feel tired. All the other children begin to yawn. And there's just this ever so faint smell in the air. Just a very, very faint sort of sweet smell in the air. You all start to yawn. And you struggle. Each of you struggle if you want. You try to resist it. But one by one, each of you passes out. One by one, by one, by one, by one. Last one standing, at least in my head canon, is the smallest of all of you. Perhaps it's the adrenaline running. But Ebb, as you are tired but still conscious, you see all the other children around you, falling asleep, passing out. The door once again opens. You see a man standing in the door. He is wearing a blue sort of trench coat, a gray shirt. He has short black kind of hair, and he has this very angular but again very pale face. He looks at you, tilts his head aside, seeming almost surprised that you're still awake. We'll make use of you, despite the actions of your father. And you fall unconscious. The next couple of weeks go by in a blur. They go by very, very quickly. Eventually, you all awaken in a barracks not dissimilar to the one that you found yourselves on, this ship. But this new place that you find yourselves in, it is a planet. It's a planet that none of you immediately recognize. It seems just a different color than you're used to. It's not red of the planet Teus. It's not the kind of thick, foresty jungle of Shah Anasanijan. It's not Bottega. It's not Savalu. It seems to be none of these places, which is odd. But it has to be one of them. They're the only habitable planets in the system, so you've been taught. But over the coming weeks, you begin to learn what you're being charged with doing, what you're being trained to do. It is a mixture of combat training, and with that combat training, there is also a mixture of learning about what the redemption is, the importance of that faith. So for some of you, this sort of training is very, it kind of feels at home. A little bit of the training for you, Ebb, reminds you of what your father taught you. Some of the training, Neon, is the more practical training that you had learned from your friend, Nova. much of the religious sort of indoctrination, if you can call it as such, which is what it is, reminds what Sis has learned and Lucian has learned. There are 3 individuals become very, very important to you in these coming weeks, and eventually these coming months, and these months eventually become the coming years. These 3 individuals are Bishop Galix, who is a very stern man, a very, very serious kind of man. He's very no-nonsense. It is from Bishop Galix, that you learn, from him you learn the importance of combat, fighting, what you are, and there's always the enemy. They call it the enemies who you're going against, the enemies of the oracles, the enemies. The void is the only other terms, but they never really give you a particular group of individuals. It's not one of the planets. It's always just the void, the enemy, the darkness. It's these very vague kind of terms that you learn about. It's from Deacon Howie, the man with the blue trench coat, this sort of gray outfit that he has, this gray shirt, that you learn about the importance of the redemption, the religion, the belief system, the structure of that, and why it is so important to defend this religious system, because it is what keeps the planets, keeps the system together, it keeps it strong. The only one whom you're all not really sure what her purpose is one that you come to know as Priestess Vosto Oduk. Everyone just calls her Priestess. She is the only one that each of you, from time to time, meets with on an individual basis. It is always in the same room, a room that is brightly lit with white walls. There are 2 chairs and a table in the middle. She sits on one side and you all on the other. And she simply asks you questions. Questions that don't really seem to have anything to do with one another. What is your favorite animal? When is the last time you thought about your parents? Whom among your friends, whom among your fellow Crusaders you wish to kill? Whom do you miss the most? What is the last thing you remember eating before you were taken? Like, all of these just random questions. And she will ask these and she'll grill you one after another. And if you take longer than a couple of seconds, 2-3 seconds to respond, there's a jolt that happens. And it's just enough to kind of hurt, but not enough to really do damage. She'll always ask over and over, and very quickly you find yourselves learning to respond kind of instinctually. These meetings, these therapy sessions, as you come to call them, they happen on a daily basis. Each of you will meet with her over the course. Now, in this facility, you find that your group of 10 children, about 3 weeks into this, Harry returns. He is very quiet, and anyone that asks him about where he was, he says something similar along the lines of learning the error of my ways and rededicating myself to the redemption. That is all he will tell you about where he was. But on this note, is actually where we are going to end session 1 of our little adventure. Our next session is going to take place 3 years in the future. I will give you an idea of what you underwent, and it is during this next session that you all are going to be sent on your first official mission as Crusaders. As Crusaders of Vindication. But I just want to say, from the bottom of my heart, thank you all for this first session. I really enjoyed it. I thought the roleplay was fantastic, and I'm excited to get to know these characters even more. A little bit for our viewers that are watching, my idea behind these first 2 sessions were to have these kind of just these moments where we get to know the kids a little bit about. I wanted to kind of build a shared backstory. That was my idea behind this. And I'm hoping that as we do this, it will strengthen the relationships that our players have, both in character and out of character. But as I always say at the end of every session, are there any final thoughts, questions, comments, or concerns before we get ready to wrap up session 1 of the Anima Inferni?
Just good game, guys. That was
Yeah,
that was a lot
yeah.
of fun.
No out of character questions, but many in character questions.
That's okay. That's fine.
Yeah.
That's fine. Excellent.
Yeah.
Well, as I always say at the end of every session as well, truly, thank you to the players for playing. It's been a very long week for me, even though it's only Tuesday, and this is something I was very much looking forward to. I'm excited for our next session. Thank you to the viewers for viewing. It's always fun to have people watch, and happy gaming, everyone. We'll see everyone here, same game time, same game place for session 2 of our Stars Without Numbers adventure, which will be the last of our 2-part kind of opener, getting to know these children during their time with the Crusaders, and then we'll truly begin our adventure a number of years in the future. But until then, be well, be safe. Again, thanks for watching.